A very warm welcome to all of you. This is a special broadcast of News9. And on the screen, you are seeing the protests which have been happening in areas where cookies live. I would like the NAT to be improved so that the viewers can understand what is happening, so that the viewers get to have a feel of what is happening in Manipur. These are the visuals of Manipur. These are the visuals where women have been protesting.
District sunga gali nei tabin ithi gam diu bangin minu te ho na me ho atam zo hi tun san gen
On this, I'm joined by my colleague, Bogies Abraham. I'm also joined by my colleague, Pankaj. I want this NAT to be played while I'm speaking so that people can understand and see what is happening. I was going through newspaper today, the Hindi newspaper today. The first headline is, and you'll be surprised to know, the first thing which has been put on paper is one-third of the cases of women मणिपुर में रोज 100 FIR, इनमें से one third have come from women. What do you make of it? One third of the complaints are coming from women in Manipur, which means that the women have been subjected to systematic attack in Manipur. So that video was not a one-off attack. It means multiple attacks, number of attacks, unreported attacks, hundreds of attacks may have taken place against women, organized in a way so that the violence is etched on the body. I think it's very, very shameful. If you look at the front page of Dainik Bhaskar, I show it to our viewers again. This is Dainik Bhaskar. Dainik Bhaskar is a very reputed national daily, and Dainik Bhaskar says, one मणिपुर में रोज 100 FIR, इनमें से एक तिहाई, one third cases are on women. Pankaj, your thoughts on it?
Well, Karthikeya, इसकी again कहूँगा कि जिस तरह से अखबारों ने the way the newspapers have taken this very aspect of Manipur violence is something which is a telltale sign that a society which is so much governed and led by the women folk is now witnessing vociferous protests against what happened on May 4th. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, let me tell you, because now reports are coming out again and again that such incidents had happened earlier. Complaints had been filed. As you mentioned, FIRs being filed by women folk is also very much there. And this, in a way, is a testament to the fact that no matter how much the society appears to be divided as of now, but the women folk are leading from the front. There are certain other, groups of women also from the meitei community, from the kuki community, kuki zo women folk who have time and again put up a united voice. Remember the visuals that came from yesterday, Karthikeya, when meitei women were actually breaking down the house of the accused who has now been arrested. Total number of arrests has gone up to 5 now. And that showed that women folk cutting across this ethnic lines have actually gone ahead and showed solidarity. Because what happened, the visuals that came out, again, that changed the course of this protest, has shaken up everyone, right from those who are sitting in the power to the opposition, to the people in general in the country. I think their voices must be heard and acknowledged.
Okay, Varghese, your thoughts on it? If you're there with me, as to women at forefront. Another important thing is whether it's maitis or cookies, women have been at forefront. And let me take you through the headline of another newspaper because for the first time after so many days, so many months, Manipur is once again making headlines and it's being reported the way it should have been reported. So it goes on to say, and I'm reading the Hindu, it says more cases of sexual assault of women surface in Manipur. And it says 2 days after, women were disrobed and paraded naked, with one of them being raped in the Thugal district of Manipur. A 45-year-old woman was stripped and set ablaze in Imphal east on May 6th. May 6th. And the
Hmm.
report says the photo of the charred body of the woman has now surfaced in social media. What sort of an administrative response is this? What sort of an administrative response is this, Pankaj?
Well, Karthikeyan, again, you're right. The country woke up to more of such reports today. 2 days later, just on May 4th, again this May 6th, again this happens. It remains to be seen that we are talking about 2 months earlier. And incidents like these reflecting or putting the police administration in a bad light. Because remember, Karthikeyan, the day that gym was burned, you and I had started the broadcast with, with the tagline that the chief minister was supposed to inaugurate that gym. And right after that, what happened is now after 2 months making headlines. So again, I would say that the cases like these, the women folk being targeted, and now the protests are coming from the past. It's the blast from the past that is coming out. And I just wonder that how our women parliamentarians, women leadership is also going to respond to it, because trust me, this is not seen before. Even the governor of Manipur, Anusuya Uike, a woman herself in active politics from 1985, she admitted that this is unprecedented. She hasn't seen this before. We are joined by noted panelists also. Most of them are women from the northeastern part also. Karthikeyan, and you and Brajesh have been day in and day out have been doing this broadcast, including your show, to the point where several aspects haven't discussed. But look at this, the visual. I mean, there was one visual where we saw women folk coming out in support of N. Singh, the chief minister, asking him not to resign because he is an elected elected representative of the people, and he should do his job and not relinquish his chair in this time of need. And then there are these women who are now saying time is up now, action is needed, and I just
Another
wonder
thing,
how much more will come.
another newspaper. This is
Mhm.
Hindustan Times. Look at the coverage. Two other women raped, killed on May 4th, no arrest. Clamor grows for CM's ouster, disquiet in BJP, complaints sent by LCW, action late, far too little. I'm joined by Professor Prasanjit. I'm also joined by Director Imphal, Hasina. Welcome both of you, and my news editor Varghese is also there. But first to you, Hasina, Manipur is a clear testament that there was organized violence against women. Now, a lot of things have become very, very evident. Should there be a commission to look into it? It looks as if NCW didn't do its job properly. Complaint sent by NCW, action late, far too little. What it did, NCW chief says that they clubbed several complaints, including of the May 4th incident, and sent 3 letters to Manipur officials. She says that they were in contact with the officials. Citing the law and order situation, did not send a team. It did not also summon officials. It did not ask them to depose. Did not respond to the complaints or contact victims. Hasina, what do you do when institutions fail?
I think when institutions fail, the Supreme Court will have to send, an order to actually set a special committee. We need to have a special committee that comprise of civil society representative who can look at both sides and not have sided of one. They need to have these commission representative so that there's a fair inquiry that has to take place.
Prasanjit ji, your opening comment?
Yes, I think that what Hasina was saying is very, very right at this point of time, that we really need a Supreme Court appointed special committee, because that committee will be neutral. It will not be politically or ethnically biased. And we need people as mediators, also as fact finders, or who can search the truth and pave the path of reconciliation. Something which could be a precursor to the established method of mediating in a conflict situation, something like Truth and Reconciliation Commission, although in a different name, to inquire into sexual violence. which is rampant in these 2 months, 2.5 months of clashes that have happened. And the people who are victimized, the women who are victimized, their voices have to be heard. So far, only an attempt has been made to nab the culprits, but no one is talking about compensating them, giving them reparation, giving them proper aid and support so that they can return to their, a life of dignity and their scars are healed in a certain way. No one is talking about that at the governmental level. Though at the civil society level, there's a cry for justice, but justice in a generalized sense, and justice in the specific case of a victim who is violated in the case of a sexual violence or sexual offense needs a special kind of justice. That kind of justice can come through a special commission that looks into women's right to get justice in the case of sexual violence, and such a commission can come from Supreme Court only. That's the highest institution of confidence at this moment. Yeah.
Verghese, your opening thoughts on it. The reports which have come on newspapers that there are multiple incidents like these that are coming to fore.
My opinion is that all these incidents needs to be investigated. Yeah, please. Sorry. Yeah. Yes. Please, the other speaker was speaking.
Just to take out, I just wanted to take out what the professor was actually trying to say, that when you try to bring in a commission, the biggest situation challenge on the ground is that you don't have the peace committee itself working. So when you're talking about something of this sort, and as Karthik was saying, 1/3 of those FIRs coming in from women just speaks about the volume of crime that has happened on women. So the question of credibility is always going to be there, whether you get a government-sponsored committee to look into this or a court-monitored this thing into it. It's going to be quite difficult because the question is about credibility. Whatever committees are made, even to investigate crimes like this, there will be hundreds of questions being raised on this. So the issue is going to be, how do you have a credible committee in place to investigate this?
Okay, Pankaj,
I think the Supreme Court appointed committee will be the only credible committee. Supreme Court can bring a legally correct and unbiased committee. No other institution can help us in this situation. Yeah.
I think I really I stand for that as well, that the Supreme Court has to take charge at this point of time. So I think the committee will have to be a fact-finding committee that is inclusive beyond sexual violence and others, because from the ground, like New Life Foundation, our state partners and our team, we are sending all our staff right now to basically do a lot of counseling, because there's so much of anguish in these camps at the moment. Like our staff who are doing humanitarian are really being turned, to get into counseling, because there's so much of situation going on. There's anger, frustrating in these camps at this moment. So, like post-traumatic syndrome is an issue that is coming in and out at this moment. As a civil society, we are running short of resources at this point. I mean, we are sending relief at this moment as well. I mean, it's the last 2 years of our work that we do on the humanitarian front for displaced people. We are having more other challenges, because situation like this, without a fact-finding committee, will escalate violence.
Pankaj, I'm astounded. National Commission for Women could have gone into the matter, raised it up at different level, could have done so much more. It just tells us that institutions which are there outside the parliamentary ambit, which face the pressure of electoral democracy, which is of numbers, ideology, propaganda, and politics, those institutions are not doing their job. I mean to say,
Exactly.
this paper sums it up so beautifully. What they did? They clubbed it together. They should have investigated it. The team could have just sent a probe. If NCW doesn't send a probe, then who will send a probe, Pankaj? It is their primary job, is like police station. If they don't admit an FIR, who else is going to do that for you? It's the primary job.
That's what my point is, Karthikeya, that we have democratic institutions in place. We have checks and balances in place. But look at it, talking about the newspaper, the Indian Express says, uproar over Manipur stalls parliament again. Rajnath hits back at opposition. I would say that rather hitting back at the opposition, We have a government at the center who cares for Northeast. Remember the tectonic shift from post 2014 as far as Northeast is concerned. I distinctly remember the day Prime Minister Narendra Modi took oath for the first time. Right 2 days after that, one ministerial portfolio that was allocated was that specifically for Northeast. Now, when we have a government in place which cares for Northeast, we can't, in a way, just say that it is ignorant of the developments there. We have institutions like Women's National Commission of Women. We have police presence there. We have armed forces there. Then why again go for a Supreme Court appointed committee? Yesterday only there was a report that more than 5 crore cases are pending in the country. Do we need to add one more? What about the accountability of the elected office bearers? That's what my point is, Karthikeyan.
Prasannaji,
Yeah, sure. Sure. I would say that. Sure, please, Kartikeya, please.
no. You first share your thought with us. Then I have a question for you on that.
Okay. My thought is that when these elected bodies and elected representatives couldn't do much, when even security forces were stalled from doing anything, correct on the ground, then in such a situation, when we are talking of a Supreme Court appointed committee, a special commission to look into the cases of sexual violence, I don't want to generalize the other forms of violence. Maybe other forms of violence are taken care of by other bodies, the elected bodies and others. But sexual violence requires a special, very special attention, as UN bodies have done in case of Rwanda, as they have done in other cases of genocide and this kind of tremendous clashes, including Myanmar and Bangladesh 1971. All the time there was a special commission to look into sexual violence. Now that there are escalation of sexual violence in order to intimidate the communities as such and to create a kind of a Lebensraum kind of a situation, clearing the space. In such a situation, I think a committee from the Supreme Court would have the moral standing to really intervene and to really mitigate the woes and pain through which the violated are undergoing. So you look at these hundreds of people, hundreds of women probably who are violated, and each case requires a special attention, not just medical attention, but a lot of attention by which their honor can be restored, their wounds can be healed, and that will set up an example of really correcting a situation and bringing back peace in Manipur. Yeah.
Okay, Hasina, since if you look at these protests, women have become women are organized. I shouldn't use the word women have become organized, but there is a lot of I would say a distinct element of women at forefront when it comes to public intervention, social intervention, political intervention, protest. What do we make of it? Is it distinctly Manipuri thing? Uh, are they being purposely mobilized like that? If you look at the photographs, if you look at those interventions, you find women at front there at protest where there is no violence, and then women are also subject to targeted violence. What is this uh, distinct feature of Manipuri politics?
So I think when we look at mass protests by women after this incident has surfaced in all the media, I think this is a very natural outcry, outburst for action, for for legal intervention that needed to be done or to be investigated. I think that happened in across communities, across culture, all over the world when the law and order fail, when the legal intervention fail. That is what comes in the forefront. I also would like to see back to when the incident happened. There were women who were also in the forefront who actually did not respond to that entire rape incident. So these are two angles, which is, in other words, very politicized. There's always this undercurrent of political intervention that is from the background, that is actually being, taken as an instigation to get the entire law and order out of hand. So I would really want to put it up that president rule is one important aspect. I think it's time that the central take charge of that and get this law and order, at a control level. Then come all the violences that is actually being, coming out in the forefront now with that tape that has come out, because this is two side of a situation, Kartike. And we have to look at this. One is an outright outburst for no legal intervention. The other is, again, the political ambit which is behind it. And we also have to see there's always two sides of one coin of any situation, right? But when we look at from a human right perspective, I would say that any kind of intervention has to be, very legally correct, functional. When you use the word functional, at this point, functional can only be directive from the Supreme Court of India. It can be functional with that directive. Present rule will be a directive, of law and order. There's no way that you can control mopping happening constantly at this moment. It will, like I'm just saying, the feedback I keep getting on the phone for my team is like, how do you reduce the anger, which is coming up in all these camps that we are also doing humanitarian support. New Life Foundation, our state partner, is like in anguish. It's like trying to control. It's civilians, who are getting more at this moment, does not know which is the right news, which is the incorrect one, which is a fake news. There's just so many kinds of information going out to the public. Who will give that right information to curtail any kind of peace talk at this moment? The law and order has to be taken into consideration. Fact finding is just not about sexual violence, it's it in totality. There has to be people who have to be brought on board by the Supreme Court, and it has to be in totality. It's just not, we have to look at children. It's just not about women at this point of time. We have to look at the relief compensation that is happening at this moment, the safety at the end of the day. Fact finding is not about one subject, in a chaotic situation that's already taking place at this moment.
Okay. Varghese, Manipur has shown that with the structures of violence, there are structures of silence in play. With the structure of violence, we have structures of silence in play. What do you think needs to be done about dismantling the structure of silence? The focus is on structure of violence, but what about the structure of silence, which is not letting violence being etched on the bodies of women being recorded? What is not allowing atrocity for not being reported? What is not happening is that people cannot talk and heal each other. I think more than the medicine, the conversation heals. You ask any psychologist, ask any counselor. It starts with a conversation. Your comments, Varghese. Can you unmute yourself? Varghese, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah. So, Karthikeya, what I was trying to say is that when you're talking about the violence on the ground, as you rightly pointed out, the trauma is going to be very huge. And as you rightly pointed out, in any kind of a conversation in terms of healing, you start with a conversation. But I was interested with the term that you used, the structure of silence. And probably a lot of people have been pointing out that the internet ban has been what we would call as a structure of silence that has been put in place. Because what exactly happened, in fact, the incident of the violence that happened on May 4th resurfaced only recently. So, and there are claims that there are more such incidents that have been happening. So there has been a structure of silence completely. Now, the state can argue saying that they were just trying to curb any sort of disinformation going out and fanning passions. So they didn't want to do that. But at the same time, what it has also done is that it's curbed the voices of people from coming out, those who have actually suffered in this conflict. So right now, what we are looking at, and as Prasanjit said, it is going to be a difficult task, first of all, because nobody has trust in any sort of the executive systems anymore, whether it is the central government or the state government. So probably we are looking at the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court also has been very interesting. They said they're looking at a hands-off approach right now, because they're just giving the guidance to the center saying, will you do it from your part? So whether the Supreme Court is going to directly intervene also depends upon what would be like, would break the camel's back, a straw that would break the camel's back. So they probably, that would be leading them to intervene in it. But for that to happen, I mean, how long we have to travel to see what actually happened during this ethnic strife that happened in Manipur?
Let me read out one more thing to you. Since I have been showing you papers, I showed you that the paper, which is a very big, well distributed Hindi newspaper, Hasina, before you came, this paper Dainik Bhaskar says मणिपुर में रोज 100 FIR, इनमें से एक तिहाई महिला उत्पीड़न के, which basically means one third are about women. So it shows one third are about women, and the worst part is that the families who were part of the Kargil war, their families were subject to, and no one should be subject to this torture. The point is that there's politics over it, Pankaj. People have compared with violence in other states. Happen and peaches have been. Everyone criticizes violence against women in any form, but Mizoram, in Mizoram, it's different and distinct because two communities have decided not only to physically, mentally separate from each other, but they're physically also separated. There's a buffer zone which is in place. So, Mr. Professor, do you think
Yes.
that the buffer zones can work? Can we create two counties in a state, with a mental and a physical border? I mean to say, even if you ask anyone senior in army, he would say it is just temporary. You can't do this. You can't have that permanent buffering in order to ensure safety and security. But this was
that's
done in
yeah.
Punjab.
Sure. That's where in case of Manipur, I'm not talking of Punjab right now. That's where in Manipur, the failure of the state comes into picture. It is state which has failed to prevent this kind of forced alienation and forced isolation between communities. That too, when there is a sense of insecurity, there is a sense of suspicion and breakdown of trust. Now, these buffer zones indicate to the larger point of a breakdown of trust and the possibility of repeat violence that can happen on communities. Now we know that kuki employees of the government of Manipur or even in the Central University of Manipur, they are not able to return to their services and jobs because they don't feel secure. So there is this insecurity which is like, clearing the space, a kind of a Lebensraum, a kind of, removal of the other from one's own homeland or one's own space. It's that kind of a exclusivist logic which is xenophobic and which is totally dangerous that is in operation through these buffer zones. Now, security forces creating buffer zone is another matter. Security forces can stand in between two conflicting sides to keep them separate and to secure both the sides. Now, there is no buffer zone created by the security forces, but it's created by respective vigilante groups between each other. So these vigilante buffer zones is a threat to fragile peace through which Manipur is undergoing now. It's a kind of a permanent method of creating distrust and breaking the peace. So security forces and the state should take over and they should ensure that people can freely pass through and go to each other's areas and there is a sense of security, friendliness back again. And that's when the restoration for peace can happen. So there is a lot of effort that is to be taken by the state government and security forces, of course, under proper political guidance and of course, under the guidance of peacemakers. It also should not be done arbitrarily, that you remove all the buffer zones. No, I'm not saying that. Let it remain. Through the buffer zones, people should see each other, how they are creating insecurity for each other. And then at some point, state will be able to, again, allow them to intersperse, to have an interface, and to have a greater sense of security with a larger sense of public good in it. So that process needs to be brought back. That's very, very important. Yeah.
Prasadji, I just want to ask you, in context of Manipur, why do gender remains a weak position in Indian politics, unlike West? Even in context of Manipur, the mobilization of women is on ethnic lines. It's not on gender. Even during the discussion on Mandal or the women reservation, the caste became important. Even in Parliament, the words like parkati was used. Gender was not acknowledged and duly recognized as a one solid entity. Even in these visuals that we see, the protests are ethnic. Now the Naga Council has protested. Naga Council is saying that this is bad. So the women have come out, but the ethnic identity remains stronger than the gender percentages. Why?
Yes, women are also divided, ethnically. So the gender identity and the kind of, sisterhood that otherwise in a typical feminist discourse we expect, that kind of a situation has been breached. In normal situation, women do come together against patriarchal violence. Here, patriarchal violence has been given two different shapes. One is a certain kind of religious fundamentalism. The other is a certain kind of an ethnic bigotry mixed with religious fundamentalism. And women of the societies have become a certain kind of a tool or an instrument. It's very unfortunate to see the videos that women are asking for rape of women. I don't want to get into the details of it. And such videos have surfaced everywhere. And so you can see a complete breakdown of trust that has created this kind of a breach in the sisterhood of women. And therefore, it has become very insensitive kind of a situation where women of one group is not responding the way they should respond in the case of women of the other group are violated. So you can see how it is breached and how this breached situation now can be, altered and transformed. It is by creating again builders of peace in between. The other day I have seen Naga women's societies, Naga women's groups, Naga mothers are talking to meitei mothers. They are talking to torch bearers. But then this talk is remaining seclusive between them. Naga women and meitei women talking. Kuki women are missing there. So you can see that how gender is also getting polarized. It's not certainly that ethnicity is taking over the gender, but gender is becoming a tool of mobilization, as you have rightly pointed out. But it is possible to rebuild the relation by way of civil society initiatives where every women's group, mothers group are brought together. There are all these mothers group, they can work together certainly. But that's not happening because of these ethnic barriers which are artificially created and social boundaries are rigidified. Now women were transcending these social boundaries. There are intercultural marriages. There are offspring from these intercultural, intercommunity marriages, and they are in between actually. There are a lot of women in between. They can be brought in to strike up a certain kind of a peace in this polarized situation as well. Yeah.
Pankaj, isn't this very ironical that in middle of all this, you have parliament session, it's supposed to debate and document and put record on table, so you have no debate because opposition wants PM to speak, government wants home minister to speak, and then in middle of it, the Biren Singh stays put because you can't concede defeat in middle of the monsoon session. So, nothing changes. Despite parliament coming to fore, in context of politics, nothing changes. Nothing will happen.
Absolutely, and this is the worrisome aspect, Kartikeya, here, because all efforts are being made, the lip service is being done, the optics are there in place, but what remains the fact: Manipur is burning. If we try to put iron fence around a tree which is hollowed by termites, it is not going to help. So we need action on the ground. When I say action, it's not a reference to any forceful action. What is happening right now in Manipur hasn't just started 2 months ago, or this kind of ferocity cannot be accumulated within just 3 months.
Okay.
It will happen. It will happen. Yes, it will happen over the months, over years. And we know that these pent-up feelings, these frictions have been there for a long time. Let me tell you, and I request you, Kartikeya, to give me 2 minutes extra. Growing up in a nondescript city in Bihar, I have witnessed the separation of Bihar into 2 states, Jharkhand and Bihar. Well, the lines were drawn, the governments were changed. Best thing that happened was the sentiments were pacified. The demand for a separate state for the tribals, Jharkhand, that came up, did not change much for me. We stayed there where we were, but the general people talking, the sentiments, they were pacified. That at least, चलो अब अगर अलग हो ही गए हैं, तो अब आप अपना राज्य संभालिए, हम अपना राज्य संभालते हैं. Likewise, here the demand for a separate administration. I've been going through these debates, following them here on News9 Live, also elsewhere. It shows that a demand for a separate administration is something that is joining both the communities together. And let me be devil's advocate here. Let me stick my neck out here. मुझे याद आता है साहिर लुधियानवी का वो गाना गुमराह फिल्म से, वो अफसाना जिसे अंजाम तक लाना ना हो मुमकिन, उसे खूबसूरत खूबसूरत मोड़ देकर छोड़ना अच्छा. If we all are dragging our feet, if nothing is changing on ground, why not give such options a chance? We have the states like Punjab and Haryana. We have states like Andhra Pradesh and Telangana who share the same capital, or till now they have shared the same capital. So why not have two different places? As Professor Prasenjit was also mentioning, you also have mentioned that let's give that a chance to them. Keep an eye, have an administration, have a common state government, but administration, separate administration. Let them handle the situation. If that could be one reason, one step forward. Karthike.
Varghese, I haven't come to you for quite some time. If you recall, when we started this program and we decided editorial, we would stay put on it. First of all, we had those visuals of churches being burned. Then came the visuals that other areas have been burned. Then came the news that people have gone to the relief camp, and then the horrors were discovered layer by layer. In the sense, we could find out that the displacement is for a longer period of time. It's not a short time displacement. What video has done is to confirm the worst fears of the first 82 hours, what must have happened, if we understand. Last week, we did a special program on children going to school. In all of this melee, one thing has become very, very clear, that Manipur as a whole will take its time to come back to that sense of ordinariness, because there is a mistrust. The basic thing is the communities do not trust each other. It's like post-partition India. Communities don't trust each other. They are not fighting the state. They are fighting in the state with each other. That is why in the 70 days, you would have noticed the reason why I gave the build-up was we did not discuss army being attacked, police officers being attacked, ordnance points were attacked, the weapons were looted, but the symbols of the authority of the state were not attacked. This is the most distinct and unique part of the conflict in Manipur. In absence of trust, what do you do? And secondly, do you think that are there any mechanisms available within civil society to reclaim the ground and build that trust? I recall Prasanjit, I think a week ago, gave us the example of Gandhi in Noakhali. Varghese.
Well, Karthikeya, what you said is right. To find those structures that can actually start building that trust factor, or what we call the confidence building measures, it's going to be a humongous task, because as you rightly pointed out, the distrust is huge, and that distrust is not only cleaved in the ethnic communities, it is also a geographical distrust. You have an easy identification, hills and valleys, and then you know who belongs to which community immediately because of the cultural and religious association. So the identity divide is huge. Then the issue, or the other issue, is that this is going to be the violence is such that it is going to be generations that will come to know about the tales of this violence. So it is something that will be propagated from one generation to the other. The tales of this violence is going to be there for a very long. So it's going to be historic memory for all these ethnic groups. Now, right now, what can be happening is probably that peace committee that had started off as a non-starter. I think the central government should start visiting it. Let us have local peace committees, places where the ethnic strife is not at a point where there can't be negotiations between communities. Because in certain areas where the populations are interspersed, there the ethnic conflict is so huge that it is going to be very difficult to get them on the talking table. But there are certain places where there is peace. So first, let's start off with those places where they're setting up a highly localized committees where they can actually bring at a local level these ethnic communities together. Then probably we'll look at the larger picture of setting a larger peace committees, with regard to the state and the state's intervention in it, and getting the whole lot of people together. But actually, let's start very local at a village level, at probably a town level. Let's start it very local and then only probably build up. But then this issue is always going to be there. That overcoming the distrust among the communities is going to be a huge factor and a huge challenge.
Okay. Hasina, tell me, do you think that with the ethnic fault lines, The religious divide has also hardened. It has become palpable, evident.
There's so much of the complexities that I can bring from the ground that I get every day because our team are there in the field. That the anger is making them more, divide even in terms of their own identity, in whether they are from the hills or from the plains, and their religious minorities situations that has been there with the Northeast for a very long time. These are questions that are actually destruct destructing a lot of the local peace initiative at the moment. It's like, okay, the church is bringing this relief. What about the plain people? Where is the relief going? Is it going to this ethnicity or that ethnicity? So these are complex situation of the ground. I mean, like for us who works with, over and above all of that, like, I mean, our relief is just for the most needed at the moment. The psychosocial support that we have put together at the ground right now is every psychosocial support is going to the camps to reduce the anxiety level of these women and girls who are actually getting all this information of what has happened. That is the need of the hour, because peace cannot happen if one section of the people who are in different ghettos are getting anxiety, are getting post-traumatic situation of what they have witnesses. They are actually not having the right information. So it has to be multiple levels of intervention in a chaotic conflict situation that is already there. It's alarming. We don't need to debate about that, but that's what we have seen for the last 72 days. I mean, my team is very limited. We are approaching different structure at the moment. That post psychosocial support has to be one of the major part in all the camps at this moment, to reduce anxiety level, to reduce this ethnicity divide, religion divide, which is coming up, because it's not that the civilian wants, any more further kind of any violence, but the anguish, our brothers, our sisters, what happened to them? Will this happen to us? These are questions coming in all the camps that we're working with. Is it the Myanmarese creating this divide? Is there, all the weapons coming from there? And for an organization that work with Myanmar at the moment, with the displaced people from there, with the internally displaced, it's a very tough task. But there's no law and order.
Hasina, people forget in modern times, radicalization and abuse is not limited to open areas. And you're the right person to answer that. Not because you are a woman, but because you do that job. People say that the Abu Ghraib was the radicalizing pit for the ISIS when the de-Baathification of Iraq took place. Karnataka report, these 5 terrorists got radicalized in jail. Abuses are common in refugee camps. Basic things are not available. We think that abuse and mental health are issues which are only confined to the first 24, 48, 72 or 96 hours of violence. But systematically being away from your home, dislocation, ruptured family, lack of ordinariness, lack of sense of security, जिसे हिंदी में कहते हैं ना घर का आंगन होना ना बरामदा होना, can create new systems of operation where abuse takes place and women and children become more vulnerable. So my question to you is, why are we auditing something which happened 2 months ago? I'm sure that the dislocation has created a new economy of abuse and torture. And Professor, you can take this question after Hasina has spoken.
Sure.
So the question, Kartike, I mean, like, for people like us who have worked for 19 years in the 8 states of the Northeast on the ground, with the team on the ground, the situation of Manipur international displacement that has taken place was supported by both the communities in our food plantation and agroforestry. The food that has grown from both the community was actually being distributed during this entire internal displaced situation that has taken up, where these farmers are looking at hunger as the first entry point of reducing the situation. That was one part of what we were trying to, address. As the situation got bad, because the need has not been met by the state as their rights, as the dutiful human rights, when there was shortage of all these food, the anger and frustration in all these ghettos was getting more. And then there was this mistrust that was already creating as a borderline. Is this a Myanmar attack on the Northeast? Now imagining for us who work with all the communities at large, trying to put that in a very, very, communicative level. That's the reason of our psychosocial support that we are trying to provide right now. We were doing this for 2 years. You can't divide yourself at this point of time when the need and the situation is alarmingly making it much more worse. Because imagining for us at the moment from the ground, after working with so much of migration, is looking, is this cookies militants from Myanmar bringing all the arms at the moment? Are they trying to disrupt? We civilians don't want that. So much of confusing messaging, communication, even among the tribe. How do you resolve when there's no one voice going down from the state or the central? There has to be a speech by the Prime Minister of India to say that, a democracy like India needs to curtail the law and order situation by the constitution. That message has to go. There has to be a imperative, no matter what failure of leadership of the chief minister, he has to abide by constitutional rights. All those politicians going down in and out, sometimes they're bringing divide because it depends on how many
silence is louder than words. But you spoke about violence, Professor. Isn't this the worst case and a result of the politics of othering?
Yes,
सारे कुकी outsider हो गए and meitei majoritarian politics करते हैं. Just because you are a bigger community, you are accused of majoritarianism. So there is no respect for the ethos of people who are large in number. And just because ethnically you're spilled across the border, आपकी loyalty पे प्रश्न चिन्ह उठ गया. And instead of you and me, Prasanajit, Kartike, Varghese, Hasina, and Pankaj, we become it's. You, them, they, it. Not people, person, name. This erasure of name, don't you think is fundamentally the root problem of what has happened in Manipur?
Yes, you are going into a more, deep rooted scenario here. I would call it an ontological description that you have very rightly given. How people exist by virtue of their names, by connecting them to a tradition, to a place, and how these connections are disinterred, how these connections are disentangled, by certain violent forces. That has become the important question. Kukis are rooted in their own land. Even if they have migrated from one side to the other side, mere act of migration doesn't turn them into illegals, as it is mooted by a certain kind of a political discourse. The discourse about illegal immigration becomes very, very vile and very violent in the context of whole of Northeast. It doesn't remain within the legal frame. It immediately jumps into a frame of othering, into a frame of directly looking at someone else as an enemy. Now this kind of an othering, this kind of a ostracization that happens by giving them a bad name, such an illegal immigrant, actually the reason for rejected of name and culture and tradition and good things that a particular community has in itself. Now this is a kind of a cultural loss. It's the kind of a cultural side. If meiteis and kukis are fighting, it's resulting into an ethnocide, a genocidal situation, and a cultural side. The best of the cosmologies that Meitei people have, the worldview that they have cultivated over centuries and thousands of years are getting erased just by becoming violent on the other community. The Kukis, who have contributed a lot to the agrarian production of Manipur, whose labor has built up the economy of the hills, based on which a lot of money is getting pumped in the valley. If hill economy is not there, money won't be there in the valley. You see, so the hill economy, which is developed by the Kukis for generations, by cultivating on the land, by carrying things on their shoulders, even by fighting for protecting land of Manipur from any kind of Myanmar's intrusion. These roles of Kukis are erased. This public memory has been altered, reshaped in terms of othering the Kukis, calling them as illegal immigrants. And this is what pains me the most, because this is creating an inhumanity. This is creating a culture of cruelty, which has pervaded through this ethnic rioting. And when such a culture of cruelty has built up, it's very easy to create a logic of revenging, a logic of othering, a logic of retaliation, which goes down up to violating the women and also even violating the children. We have seen in earlier clashes that women were not so much violated, but there were attacks on children. So in a certain way, such attacks and genocidal intent manifest itself. And right now, such violence in
speaking,
Yes.
there was a book a long time ago. I read Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth.
Yes. Franz Fanon, as you have pointed out, Wretched of the Earth, is talking about the responsibility that one has towards the other. Jean-Paul Sartre's introduction to Wretched of the Earth, which ends with this idea of responsibility towards the other. And that's what defines humanity. And responsibility towards the other is absolutely necessary for any kind of social justice. Fanon, of course, is advocating a kind of a violence against the powerful violators, the powerful aggressors. A kind of a violent response on the part of the masses is advocated by Fanon. I won't agree to that, being a proposer of non-violence. I would say we can use Gandhian method in order to change the heart of the aggressor, change the heart of the violator. That's more important in the Indian context. Yes.
You require great moral courage to be a Gandhi. I mean, to say, guys,
Yes.
you look at all the contemporary writings of people on Gandhi and Noakhali, but the children will get the impression he did the most politically incorrect thing to do. So the moral centricity of his action gets overridden by the narrative on what is politically correct or not. So, Varghese, what is happening in Manipur is, instead of healing touch, propaganda has taken over. So it has become poppy cultivators versus those who protect the state. It has become who represents uniqueness of India and those who come from outside. The nuances are lost. Vaishnavism, the imprint of Vaishnavism is beautiful in Manipur. But there is another side. It also injected casteism in the Manipuri society. You speak to Kukis, their oral narrative, I had this opportunity, and they have a different imagination of this cultural imprint, the nuance of history. So do you feel that there is less of healing touch and more of propaganda and narrative building, and it is for this reason that the problem persists in Manipur?
Well, I think the propaganda has happened.
I will not use the word problem, and Varghese and Pankaj, next time I use it, please point it out publicly. I will not use the word problem. Manipur is not a problem. This situation exists.
Well, when we look at Manipur, Kartikeya, it is a multi-ethnic, multicultural society which has formed its own composite culture, recently. It's a microcosm of what we imagine as India to be, as a composite culture. But this composite culture, when has gone through this ethnic strife, the biggest thing, as you were pointing out, is how the othering process. So when the othering process happens, the biggest thing is to define your enemy. And there is where the propaganda comes. And as you rightly pointed out, you need to other the other person. Though both of them in their history or in their recent past would have had a composite history as well, in which they would be talking about how both of them achieved certain things in Manipur. So right now, when the conflict is going on, of course, you want to believe that the other person is evil. And the idea of propaganda is that. So right now, this is what is being done. That is to propagate your enemy, to define your enemy. And it is defined on that ethnic lines. How to define those ethnic lines? You attribute something illegal of one community or the other community, you try to give it as an attribute of them. Poppy cultivation has been one of the biggest issues that has been put across as an issue that has been propagated in the hills. Now, they don't say that it is from a particular community, but they say poppy cultivation in the hills. It is a message already given that it is the community that is the hills who's engaged in it. But ironically enough, there is also evidence saying that poppy cultivation has been engaged by the other community who have owned certain parts of the hills as well.
Yes,
so
tell me.
If you look by the crime records, it gets negated. But
am I audible?
Yes,
Pankaj?
yes.
Am I audible, Hasina? Am I audible to
Yes.
all of you? Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, because I have certain certain it's like this, Prasanajit. It's like when we start othering people, I'm giving you a far off example. It's like in Andhra Pradesh, suddenly the Waqf Board decided that Ahmadiyas are outside the fold of the Muslim community, and suddenly you have othered it without constitutional mechanism. So this is what is happening in Manipur in a different way. You immediately other the community. I'm putting this in a broader perspective. The government of India has reacted. So it's like this othering which takes place at a civil society level. Manipur is a whole level different, but this is a sense of othering. Can you unmute yourself? Yeah, please.
Yes, I'm unmute. So you see, there is a scroll report, absolutely chilling, and it sends chill down to your spine. A kuki woman who was taking a shelter in Meitei Pangan home, was taken forcefully away. And she was, molested or whatever, how she was violated. But that man who sheltered her, he was also attacked and ostracized because he sheltered a kuki person who was in crisis. And in no way, the reason that was given, your kuki community is attacked our Meitei community, so we are not going to spare them. Now, this kind of othering, which is there as part of everyday discourse, and a kind of a vigilantism that is built in, state has to come. Why state goes absent in this kind of a context of vigilantism? State which is all pervasive and which has a panopticon look, which is surveilling everyone through various kinds of digital means, can survey the movement of troublemakers, and they can see where they are going, whom they are targeting. It can also see who are being violated and victimized. They can be also kept in a certain kind of a watch. And then state can take appropriate measures. But state was completely absent. The absence of the state actually raises the question of justice. Why state remained absent? Why state allowed these kind of things to perpetuate and keep on going into violent situations?
Yeah. Important people in state absent, or they are silent, or they are absent and silent both.
Sense of withdrawing themselves and allowing the actors to act in a manner that it will produce a situation whereby later on they can play some politics, to put it in a very simple word. So this kind of an instrumentalization of politics, instrumentalization of their absence, allowing a certain kind of a foul situation to build up, is something that comes out from the ground reality. And I am totally shattered to see that people are in grief at this moment. Everyone is mourning for somebody's death, somebody's injury. And there's all pervasive grief and mourning in Manipur. And then there is a kind of a virile sense of pleasure, a virile sense of winning a medal by committing violence is also going on in parallel. And from all this microcosm of politics, this field of emotions, state is not able to come and make its presence felt and to correct the situation. And emotions are going, astray, I would say, at this point of time. People are grieving. People are calculating a kind of a revenge, People are using guns. They are surveilling the other community, their targets. And the soft targets, women as soft targets, are becoming easy prey to this kind of attacks. And this is going on, this vigilantism. And in a civilized democracy like India, vigilantes have taken over the state. This is an absurd situation, height of absurdity. And this is what has happened in case of Manipur. And this is being fueled from behind by certain political factors and actors, which is just not acceptable.
You know what I really feel, Hasina, what I really feel, Pankaj, is that Manipur is also subject to a lot of political considerations now because Lok Sabha elections are close by. There has been such a strong demand for the removal of the chief minister, not because someone says when chief minister should be removed or person needs to be removed that you are personally culpable, but out of moral responsibility, like Madhav Sandhya's resignation, Lal Bahadur Shastri's resignation. Madhav Sandhya was not driving that train. Lal Bahadur Shastri was not driving that train. No one is saying that you are responsible for that particular incident, but you are morally responsible for the administrative health of the state. In absence of that action, and people trying to locate themselves in the community politics, and then people justifying it, for electoral purposes is I think, to me, really the root problem. I would really be very happy if both of you can make time, and I would like to see what happens on Monday. How competitive politics of parliament is taking a toll, because, as I said, anyone and everyone should speak on Manipur. But if opposition says Prime Minister should speak, then then it becomes an issue. The sumotoness has, or for example, no short duration discussion, but discussion after saying that all the important issues of the day to be suspended. So imagine Manipur has become a vehicle to articulate something which has become India versus India. It's like women's body becoming honor of a community. It acquires a different meaning. So you lose out on particular cases, you lose out on how to get people together, you lose out on the fact that people should get sick of discussing kuki, meiteis and nagas and speak in larger terms like Manipuri citizenship or the idea of citizenship. I think on Monday, Prasannaji ji, I would love to have you to explore this idea of citizenship as articulated by many others, in Mr. Mamdani, in one of the most well-written book, that what citizenship should be, which can create a plural society. And shouldn't that be the process through which Manipur can heal itself? I would really like to thank Hasina, you, Prasannaji, Pankaj, and Varghese for making time, and my producer Akash and Vishal and Vinod for making time today to organize this special broadcast from News9. Thank you so much. I think for me to speak to you is also a healing experience. It does. It's learning and healing both. It sobers me up. Thank you so much.